America, we got to get back to doing what's expected of us as free citizens in this democracy. That means being tolerant, being respectful, staying informed, and being engaged. I'm former Congressman Joe Walsh. Follow me here and join the millions of Americans who are renewing their social contract with each other. The social contract, it's on us. Hey, former Congressman Joe Walsh with you this Tuesday. I've said this before. One of the coolest, maybe the only cool aspect of this Trump era is how it has brought people together who ordinarily are on opposite sides or don't agree with each other on much of anything. But this notion of defending our democracy against the threat that Trump is has brought a lot of strange bedfellows together, including this gentleman. He's one of my favorite progressives to read every single time he writes something or tweets anything. Jeet Heer, welcome, my friend. He writes for The Nation. He's a prolific writer. He's a genuine progressive. I haven't told you this, man. Crazy Tea Party Joe Walsh, you're one of my favorite people to read by far. So welcome.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Yeah, I mean, I do. It is very interesting that, I mean, maybe the only good thing, as you say, about the Trump era, but I mean, I have found like my reading has really broadened out, in terms of a lot of people that used to write for the Weekly Standard or
Yes.
National Review. I mean, which I'd always read, but like, maybe read a little more appreciatively now than I did before.
You can, by the way, everybody, you can follow Jeet on Twitter at Heer Jeet, HeerJeet. He's also on Blue Sky at Jeet Heer, bsky.social. Again, he writes for The Nation. Jeet, I want to start here. There's so much I want to cover with you, but I want to start here. I'm obsessed with why the Democrats lost to Trump, because I consider Trump to be the most horrible person who's ever lived. And I'm obsessed with this question of what Democrats need to do to pull together some sort of a majority to beat him and beat Trumpism. I know you've got your views on this, so I want to start with a really broad question.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a good question. And I mean, the basic
why did they lose?
Well, I think the thing to understand is that, like in the last few elections, and I would actually really say, going back to maybe the beginning of the 21st century, like American politics has not been defined so much on the regular, like Republican, Democratic, left-right spectrum as pro-system and anti-system. That is to say, and I think this is true not just in the United States, it's actually true more broadly in Europe and certainly in Canada and Latin America and in Asia, which is to say that there's a lot of people that are dissatisfied with the existing order of things, and that the politicians that tend to succeed are the ones that can have some convincing message of change and speak to like people's discontent. And I mean, since you said like to step back, which I think is a really good idea, like just to step back to like, the beginning of this century. And you had George W. Bush winning in 2004, but then quickly, getting into a bunch of trouble. There's the Hurricane Katrina. There was the failed attempt to privatize Social Security or reform Social Security, which I think people forget, but which are really important. But then, like the sort of, the war in Iraq started to go really bad with like the insurgency really picking up, and like, like the number of body bags coming back home, like really getting out of control. And then the economic meltdown of 2008. And so at that point, Americans were ready for, like something different, right? Like let's try something new. And Barack Obama was new not just like in terms of I'm not a Republican, but he also said like let's turn the page on the era of Clinton and Bush, right? Like let's not go back to, and that was a big argument against Hillary Clinton, like she belongs to this earlier era, and hope and change, like let's do the sort of transformative thing. And he won like what is still the biggest majority in the 21st century in America, and one of the biggest majorities, going back decades. The At least Reagan. Now, having said, and in 2012, I mean, I think Obama disappointed many of his own supporters on the progressive side by not pushing the change stuff enough. But in 2012, he was gifted with an opponent who was Mr. Establishment, right?
Yeah.
And like Mitt Romney, the Romney family has been big in politics since the 19th century, right? And he's like, this businessman, and Obama was able to say quite convincingly, because that this guy is a vulture capitalist who made his money by offshoring jobs to Ohio, from places like Ohio overseas, and he was able to make that case because it was actually a case that was also made by Republicans like Newt Gingrich, right?
Yeah.
And so Obama, even though he was incumbent in 2012, was still able to write, "I'm still the change guy." Like compared to Mitt Romney, like
Okay.
Romney is still the old order, right? He's still
Yeah.
the old order of like globalization or free trade. And
Yeah.
like Obama could still run against that. Now in 2016, you had the Democrats. This was like a huge mistake on their part. They decided to let's go back to the era of the Clintons. Let's
Another establishment
yeah,
candidate.
let's go back to the most establishment candidate. Someone who's like husband had been a president, and whose whole argument was that she was establishment. She said, "I'm qualified.
Yeah.
I've been in the Senate.
Yeah.
I'm bipartisan. I know how to work with John McCain, and I've been head of the State Department." But in 2016, people were still like pretty upset, and actually increasingly upset, because a lot of the effects of globalization were really playing themselves out in the Midwest. And unlike Obama, who could say, like, "I'm not responsible for NAFTA, right? And I'm not going to sign. And if I do trade deals, they're going to protect jobs and they're going to protect the environment." Like Clinton had that Clinton name. That
Yes.
which, and her campaign itself said, like, there, people say, "Well, why didn't she go to Michigan? Why didn't she go to Wisconsin?" Well, you know what? Their own polling showed that if she campaigned in Michigan and Wisconsin, she would have lost by even more.
So
Because yes, yes,
So Hillary, this is so cool. Hillary was another establishment candidate. Trump
yes.
was clearly
Yeah.
anti-establishment.
And Trump hit
Bernie,
all the anti-establishment notes. He said, "I'm against all these trade deals that like lost you your jobs, especially in the Midwest, right? I'm against this sort of foreign policy of like he attacked Bush on the Iraq War and said like I'm against these stupid regime change wars, and I'm gonna have an America First foreign policy that will be like like."
when the Democrats actually had their anti-establishment candidate in Bernie.
Yeah, exactly. No. The Democrats rejected their anti-establishment candidate, and the Republicans embraced theirs. And like we saw, like like even though Trump didn't win the popular vote, like the fact that he was able to flip the Midwest like that was very significant, and really
So
showed
how
that.
did Biden then win in 2020?
Well,
Another establishment.
in 2020, the thing is, like, Trump could no longer run against the man. He was the man, right? And he was
Okay.
the man during the time of COVID. And he was also, like, there was all these offsets, like including the George Floyd uprising. And Biden, even though he was like, like he's Mr. Establishment himself, but I think that there's like enough anger against Trump at that point that he was able to harness a lot of that anger and actually get a lot of the sort of Bernie people, the people who sat out in 2016, were able to come on board again for Biden because they didn't like Trump at that point. But like fast forward to 2024, right? And like I think Kamala Harris really, this was like a big mistake on her part because like I mean Biden was going to lose. They got a second shot with Harris, and Harris refused to separate herself out from Biden. She
Yeah.
refused to say, and she like literally said, like, I'm not going to do anything different. Yeah, maybe I'll appoint a Republican to like the cabinet. But she really like like was not offering people like change, and a lot of her stuff was the same. Like I'm qualified, right? Like like I've been the vice president, I've been a senator, and that's not what people like wanted to hear. And again, Trump was able to at a point where people like coming out of like inflation and coming out of COVID, like really wanted some sense that things are going to be different, things are going to be changed, was able to harness that change. And I mean, I think the big thing was that a lot of that anti-Trump vote just sat out of it because they saw that Harris was just going to continue what
If
Biden was
she,
doing.
Gee, if Harris, even in 100 days, if she had come out from on day one and said, "Love Joe Biden, but damn it, I'm different, and
Yeah.
we got to boom, boom, boom," and she really separated herself and tried to run as more anti-establishment, could she have won?
I think she could have won. Yeah, I think she was in a hard position for a number of structural reasons. One of which is that the Democrats were really deep in the hole in terms of money because the donor class had held back, and then once she was in, she was pretty dependent on the donor class, and they vetoed a lot of her any sort of economic populism that she could have picked up, any of that sort of Bernie stuff. For example, polling was pretty clear and showing that if she had said yeah, inflation actually is a problem. I know that everyone's hurting, and I guess what? It's because of price gouging. It's because of these companies. They're raising prices. I'm going to use all the sort of means I have, levers. We have to go after price gouging. But the people, and I'll name names. I mean, her brother-in-law's Tony West, a CFO of Uber, a big in raising money from Wall Street, and
Yeah.
he basically vetoed any sort of strong economic populist message that she could have run on that. So
Hey, Gee,
um,
tell me if I've oversimplified things. I've said now for a long time that we're living in a populist moment. Trump is a demagogue, but he
yes,
recognizes the moment. Democrats have never recognized the populist moment we're in.
no, they haven't. And in fact, I think that they've done the opposite, which is that instead of responding to populism by saying we have our own populism, they have decided to become the pro-system party, and they have decided
Ah,
we are the party of the establishment and the rules, the norms. We are the party, and it becomes tricky. But I think it is very significant that in terms of going after Trump, to say they basically validated a lot of Trump's own message of being I'm the threat to the establishment, because they said we're bipartisan, we have the support of all these elderly Republicans, and also even the use of the law. I think this is very crucial. And I think it's a real dilemma for Democrats or anyone who opposes Trump, because the guy's a criminal, right? He broke a lot of laws.
yeah.
But if you're an anti-system politician, breaking the law doesn't hurt you, because that just proves that the man
But
hates you.
then I agree with that, Jeet. But then she was running against someone who committed crimes trying to overthrow an election. You have to talk about that, don't you?
I think you have to talk about that, but I think that if she had talked about it with any sort of populist way of saying this guy is a criminal, but he's also just out for himself. He's doing this he's
Okay.
breaking the law because he wants to stay out of jail, and then he's gonna come back and he's gonna enrich himself, and he's gonna enrich his rich buddies. Any of the sort of stuff that Obama used against Mitt Romney, of saying this guy has benefited from the system, because it's
So
very
Are you saying, Jeet, that they should have said she should have said more, yeah, he tried to overthrow an election because he's out for himself, instead of he's a threat to democracy,
yeah.
which is what I said a lot of.
Yeah. I really do think that some sort of emphasis on the fact that Trump, his policies, and the people around him are going to hurt the ordinary people. You have to give people a stake in an election. You have to you're a politician. You know this. You have to reach people where they are, and people are living their own lives, and they have to see, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my family? Right? And Trump's case in particular. The Democrats, and this is part of the pro-establishment message. Hillary actually said, he's not a real billionaire. And by the way, real billionaires Mike Bloomberg support us, right? And
Yeah.
Harris did some of the same thing by having Mark Cuban out there, and whereas I think one could have easily made the argument this is the candidate of the billionaires more than anyone else, right?
So,
That this is the candidate of Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, and if you put him on, it's going to be putting the fox in charge of the
Gee,
chicken coop.
that's so fascinating to me, because I was out there every day campaigning for her as
Yeah.
a Tea Party guy. And I wanted to convince the American people that the threat to democracy should matter.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you're
no,
saying
no,
that was a bad road
I
to
think,
go
well,
down.
I think democracy. I mean, I agree with you. Like he's a threat to democracy. There's no question. We're seeing that right now, right? He's like you just had this guy. There's no regard for the Constitution. But I think like democracy, like is an abstraction, and you have to explain how
Hmm.
does this abstraction like affect you, right? Like how does this affect people? What does actually democracy like mean? And I think like if you have in Biden's case, often like what they did was they said, well, we tried to do something, and like the student loan thing, and it didn't work out, and like that's too bad. Well, the message you're sending is like, we can't do anything for you. You had to have that basic message. What am I going to do for you? And more important, and also like what this guy is going to do for you, and what this guy's going to do for
That's
is going to,
Jeet,
uh,
that's really, really interesting
yeah,
because
yeah,
I would tell voters, I get that you care about the price of eggs,
yeah.
but damn it, you should care about the future of our democracy too. Like the
Yeah.
average working class person should care about both. But
Yeah,
you're saying that's a tough case to make.
no, yeah, but I think that the democracy has to be folded into like what it actually means for people, and it is the case like like okay, Trump is a threat to democracy, and also like if he has all this power, he's going to do it to enrich himself and enrich
Uh,
his friends, and these are people that like actually becoming more unpopular. Like Musk is much less popular than even Trump is, and I think you could have made that case like early on that like if it's going to
was
be
Gee, in your mind, because I was part of like Republicans for Harris, right?
yeah
Me and Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and Kamala Harris embraced us, and we went out there and campaigned for her to
yes.
try to bring these Nikki Haley voters and independents. From your perspective, was that a mistake for her to do that?
Well, I think the thing is you need all different kinds of voters, and I think like going back to 2016, like Chuck Schumer said, like for every blue collar worker that we lose in Eastern Pennsylvania, we're gonna gain two in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and he said
Yeah.
that this will be replicated in Ohio, Michigan. Now, obviously, that didn't work out, and I think one reason to understand that it didn't work out is just very basic math, which is like what percentage of the American public is college educated? Like
Right.
the Joe, like can you like it's a third, right? Like
It's a third, less
two
than a
thirds
third.
of
Yeah.
Americans don't have a college education, a third do. So like just like the math of like pursuing college educated Republicans, because that's what you're talking about,
Yeah.
and they did. I mean, they did very well with those voters. That's actually something that Harris actually increased her voting share on, in the places, like the suburbs of Philadelphia and other places like that. They did better. But those other voters, there's many more of those other non-college educated voters, many of whom used to be Democrats not too long ago. And like just the pure math of it is that you have to be focused. You have to have a message for those people as well. Like I think, like like politics is an additive thing. Like Trump's own coalition is incoherent. It includes like anti-vaxxers, and
Yeah.
religious fundamentalists, but free market types. But in the Democratic coalition, like you need people, you need the Joe Walsh. I'm never saying like let's kick out the Joe Walsh, but I'm also saying that there's a lot more of these blue collar voters out there, and
I
like why wasn't there a message focused on them?
Jeet, I agree with that, but like because Kamala went after the Joe Walshes and the Liz Cheneys, did she turn off people on the left? Do you think?
Um, I think it's a hard. Yeah, I think that there was some alienation or some demobilization. I would personally say it's not so much. I mean, yeah, I think some of the sort of embrace of Liz Cheney, but it's also like the extent to which it was done. Like it really
Yeah,
became an overriding message.
yeah,
And then like there's a lot of other people that are feeling like you're not talking to me, and like where she suffered from was like younger voters, people of color, non-college educated, sort of working class voters. And I think that like if there had been like a more of a message for those people, and it had to have been a change message. And I think the question is like it's not like I disagree with the threat to democracy. Like he is a threat to democracy. But if you had a message saying like, here's how we preserve democracy by doing X, Y, and Z for you to make your life better, right? And that Trump is going to become an autocrat and he's going to benefit his rich buddies. I think that you could have had the democracy message, but then also reach the people that you actually ended up losing.
That's really fascinating. I think I disagree, but I need to think about it. That's really, really interesting. But to your point, when I got elected to Congress 12 years ago as a Tea Party guy, back then Republicans were winning the college educated suburban vote before Trump, and we were losing working class voters, and now it's completely flipped.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, traditionally, like I think people don't understand this, but college educated voters, going back at least to like I mean, even FDR,
Yeah.
like we're always like like the backbone of the Republican party. But I mean, like like in terms of the math, you need those non-college educated voters, and I think that's like the real story is that not so many of them in this election, like there was some increase of the Trump coalition, but it was really like a lot of people stayed home.
Why?
And if people,
Why? I want my listeners to hear this because you've said this before. I think it's important. You're saying she lost because so many in the Democratic coalition just didn't come out.
Yeah, no, a lot of people didn't come out. Well, I mean, it is because it was the message of I'm the pro system person. I'm the pro establishment person. I'm the bipartisan person that will return us back to the world before Trump. And that was also, to some degree, Biden's message,
Yeah.
Which was able to work in 2020 because people were sick of Trump at that point, and they've sort of forgotten how sick of Trump they were. But, like I think for most people, like going back to like, the good old days is not going to do it anymore. Restoring. I always called it. It was a policy of ancien regime restoration, right?
Yeah.
Like like after the French Revolution, you got like these monarchists, like the Bourbons, that always tried to return the King of France, and pretend the French Revolution never happened, right? And like like they succeeded for a while. They actually had like a monarchy, two different monarchies in the early 19th century. But it ultimately failed because people don't want to go back to the past. Things have changed. They want to have some sense of change and a future. And I think that message of preserving democracy, restoration, let's go back before Trump, like to a lot of people that reads like you're not engaging with the issues of here and now. You're not offering me a future.
Jeet, how long do you see us in this pro-system, anti-system kind of a dynamic?
Well, I think that you're not going to get out of this until you have like sort of like a period of sustained economic growth, that like reaches most people. And I think a lot of Democrats don't want to hear this because they kept their message. And I had a lot of arguments about this with Democrats. Their message under Biden was, "Oh, look at the figures, look at these statistics. The economy is great." And I gotta say, like even under Biden, what you got was a two-track economy, and this actually explains the breakdown of the electorate because Biden, Harris won among college-educated people very well. But basically, like if you're college-educated, like things are actually like Biden's economy was good. You're doing well. But like among even if unemployment is lower among the working class, what you're seeing is a lot more precarious jobs. You're seeing these Uber jobs. You're seeing people working as delivery people, and they're delivering to the college educated, right? It's the the people who have a little bit of money who are ordering like their Starbucks to be delivered. But those like precarious jobs are like really insecure. It's a hard life, and there's nothing to address that. And those are the people that either went for Trump or stayed home, right? Because there was nothing that was being offered to them. And unless you address those voters, like I don't see a future.
Even if everything you just said was right, would it have made a difference if we had a guy in the White House who wasn't 200 years old and he could actually communicate what you're saying now. Like, it's like we didn't even have a president who could communicate
Yeah,
any
yeah.
of
No,
this
no,
shit.
I mean that is one of the original sins, like of all this. Like, like Biden had stepped down in 2022 and said, "I did my job, and I'm going to be a one-term president," and
Yeah.
open it up to Democrats. You would have actually had a primary. You would have had like someone come up who's like more articulate. If Biden had been 10 years younger, right? I think the Biden of I mean, even in Washington, like Biden, like in 10, 15 years ago, like a really like articulate,
Yeah.
forceful guy, and he actually would have he Biden. I think this is one of the tragedies. Biden more than Harris knew the economic populism, right? Like
Yes.
Biden could
Yes.
speak to those working class voters, and he was more willing. I mean, she was into to some degree sort of kept in check because of her advisors and because she was so dependent on the donor class.
So
But I think a younger Biden, more forceful Biden, or someone else, who came up in the primaries, who could have separated themselves out from Biden and said, "Here's the way to the future," and be a candidate for the future, not a candidate for the past.
So, okay, so Jeet, based on everything you're saying, I'm going to ask a stupid question, but answer it if you can.
Mhm.
So you've got the Democratic Party now. Overlay what you've said with this.
Yeah.
To win, does the Democratic Party need to move to the left or move to the center? And
See,
I
that's
know you're
okay.
going to say that's the wrong question.
Well, no, this is the wrong question because I don't think that the
Yeah.
sort of spectrum of like left, center, right is a spectrum. It's a pro-system, anti-system. They need someone who's anti-system and can convincingly sell the Democratic Party message um, uh, as an anti-system
So they
politics.
need a populist.
They need a populist. They need a populist, and that populist could be like like it wouldn't be my politics. They could be to the right on certain issues like immigration, right? But they could be left on economics. And I think there are a few of the people. The guy who ran in Nebraska who lost, but
Yeah.
overperformed Harris. I mean, that was his basic message. I'm an economic populist, but I'm gonna also limit immigration, like something like that. So someone who's like unconventional actually, I think like a labor leader, like Sean Fain or could do it.
I think, Jeet, I think you're right. Again, we're living in a populist moment. MAGA, Trump has recognized it, and
Yes.
he lies and demagogues. The
Yeah.
Democrats haven't even recognized the moment we're in. They need a populist, a fighter.
Yeah.
Is it does that populist have to be from the left?
Well, if it's for the Democratic Party, I mean, like you're gonna lose your own people if it's for that. And I mean, I think like on the economic stuff, it kind of has to be. I don't think like on social issues. I think it's more for grabs. You could have a sort of more mixed message on. Or I mean, I think the message to sell on social issues is like this is just a distraction, and this is just gonna. I'm gonna focus on what's really important, which is like
Jeet,
making your life better.
is it an oxymoron, or is it possible to be a centrist populist?
I think that's a kind of the oxymoron, except in the sense of you could be like you could be a centrist in the sense of you're not going to do the strict left line on every issue. And I think Bernie in 2016, like his message on immigration was not the conventional Democratic Party message. So I actually think like you can mix it up a little bit. I actually think it's probably good to actually take like not just some liberal take a straight liberal line or even some centrist lines, like maybe find a few conservative issues that you can kind of co-op.
And again, I know your politics and mine are different, and that's why I love to talk to you.
Yeah.
Could a real effective far left populist get elected president in this country?
I mean, I don't know what you mean by like sort of far left. I mean, I
Like,
think
if
there's
let's say Bernie was 15 to 20 years younger.
yeah. I actually think like someone like Bernie, but I think actually like if you actually look at Bernie, um, in 2016 and even in 2020, like he was left on economic issues. He was not left on social issues.
Right.
Uh, and
Right.
I think that's kind of like important. Like I actually think that you have to have, and I wouldn't necessarily you have to like take the right wing line on social issues, but I think you have to take the line maybe that, like, this is not where politics should be. Like, why are we talking about trans people? Like, leave people alone, let people make their own decisions. But actually, as president, I'm going to focus on the economy. I,
Be,
I actually think that that's a better message.
um, I think you're right. Jeet, you wrote a piece a week or two ago, and you made clear on Trump's and Musk's popularity is going down.
Mhm.
But I was blown away by the Democrats are still incredibly unpopular.
Well, yeah, because if you, I mean, the thing is, uh, they're unpopular because they're unpopular with their own people. I mean, like Trump is going down because like Democrats and independents in particular don't like him. I think what Democrats are finding is, okay, Republicans don't like him, independents don't like them, and then their own people don't like him because a
Yeah.
lot of Democrats are frankly really mad that Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are doing nothing. I mean, like Schumer actually said something which I was like amazed by. He said like, well, when would you like really think this is a fighting issue and you're gonna raise the stakes? He said, okay, if there's something that's really like life or death, I'm gonna tie myself to the railway tracks, and so basically your scenario is like you're gonna be like in a silent film, and like tie yourself to the railway track, and then Trump out of
Well,
the merciful of his heart will just like stop the train, and that's not
for,
going to happen if you
yeah,
do
and
tie yourself.
for the record, Jeet Heer and Joe Walsh agree. Chuck Schumer should be nowhere near a TV camera.
Yeah, I don't know,
Period.
and who their messages I don't want to be like ageist or anything like that, but like they have the House oversight, very important. You have to have oversight, and they went with like this guy Jerry Connolly, who's
Yeah.
been a good congressman, been there a long time, but is like 74 years old and like has throat cancer, and like if you listen to him talk, is not the most forceful speaker, and they could have had AOC or they could have had anyone else like who's more younger, more TV worthy, more presentable. I mean, they really do not present themselves as like we're fighting for you, and that's part of the populism. Like it's not
Yeah.
just like the stance you take; it's like I'm fighting for you.
Fighting for you.
Yeah.
No,
Do
that's
you have
so important.
do you think that Hakeem Jeffries is fighting for you? Do you think Chuck Schumer is fighting for you?
No, no, no. And a lot of this, Jeet, is persona. I need a guy or a gal who's like, "Rrr,"
Yeah,
and that's not Hakeem.
not just persona. It's like it's a matter of like your whole attitude towards politics. Like the Democratic leadership is conflict averse. They really see like
Ah,
let's keep out of the headlines. Let's not
yeah,
like stir up trouble. And it's partially because of the nature of the coalition. They have a very diverse coalition. So the people that tend to rise to the top are the people I can get along with everyone and whatnot. Whereas Trump is not conflict averse, right? Like
yeah.
he's picking fights with everyone. He's picking fights with Canada. Yeah. So and but if you so that makes Trump more convincing anti-system politician. Like he's always like trying to fight with someone, whereas Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are trying not to fight with anyone at
So,
all.
so, Jeet, again, Trump,
Yeah.
Trump may try to run again. Trump
Yeah.
will not run again, but there will be a Trumpy MAGA Republican nominee
Yeah.
to defeat that JD Vance or whoever it is. Democrats need who or what kind of candidate?
I think that they need someone from the outside, like frankly. Like I think that you need someone who can be credibly not tied with the Democratic Party as it exists. Because I actually think the Democratic brand is terrible. And it's terrible not just among the traditional conservatives that oppose it, but among the sort of traditional Democratic voters who like have basically seen that the party elite and the party establishment have failed. In some ways, it is very similar to the Republicans, as you mentioned, the Tea Party era,
Yeah,
like under Obama, where there's a lot
yeah,
of anger at the head of the party, the rhinos,
yeah,
like we call them the dinos, right? There's
yeah.
a lot of so I think like if I were like strategizing it, there's this a stream of sort of outsider candidates that could come in. One possibility, which like people are thinking about, is like the unions could put someone forward, like Sean Fain. There's a few other people, right? And they could come in and say, like, we're the people who are the backbone of the party. We can win the working class. And by the way, we don't have a record. We're not tied with like all the stuff that the party's done that you don't like. Another possibility is some sort of celebrity figure that, like, like can have like people are talking about Stephen Smith, right? But
Yeah.
like, but somebody like that who can sort of channel anger, not just at Trump and not just at Trump and Vance, but against the Democratic Party establishment, and say like, these people have, like as Trump did in 2016, right? Trump was running in 2016 not
Yeah.
just against Hillary Clinton. He was running against
The Republican Party.
Romney, McCain,
Yeah.
McConnell, and say like, I'm going to be a different sort of Democrat, and can have a kind of diverse message that like might include some centrist points or some conservative points,
So someone who would
but
run
also a lot of
against
I think the economic populism is a key for holding this party together.
someone, Jeet, who would run against the Democratic establishment.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I honestly think that we have, and here your expertise could come in very useful. I think that we have the sort of beginnings of maybe a Democratic Tea Party.
Tea Party. Yeah.
Yeah. There's someone, people running to challenge the party and hold it accountable, and make it more a fighting party and a forceful party and a party that has some principles, and rather than just always trying to
Oh,
please everyone.
Jeet, I think that's brilliant. I was on CNN about a week or so ago, and I said kind of what the Democrats need is their own version of the Tea Party. You've been saying the same thing. I think that's so smart.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the party would accept it.
Well, I think it'd be a challenge, but I honestly like, if you're looking at like in terms of donations, in terms of party morale, like it is a very similar situation to what the Republicans were like in 2010, 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
Like where it is, and frankly 2016, where there is a kind of feeling like, like we've tried this and it doesn't work, and we had these party leaders and they're not successful, they're not doing the job. We got to try something else. I think there's be a lot of people that would be receptive to that. Because I mean, again, we are in an anti-system moment. We are in a moment
Yes.
where, like, until we get some sort of, I think what the only thing that's going to end the anti-system moment, which you asked before, is like if you get a return to a kind of like an Eisenhower level of prosperity, right? Like a
Ah,
kind of, like a widely shared prosperity and a
okay.
period of sort of peace and calm. Like, I think no wars would actually be very important, and a more, someone who can sell like a stable foreign policy and a stable domestic prosperity. I think at that point temperatures will go down and you'll get more people believing in the system again. But
Hey,
what we're seeing right now, and I guess it's not just in America, like if you look at like Germany, like
yeah.
especially among the first time voters in their 20s, right?
Yeah.
Like more than 50% of the vote went either for the biggest party among young voters was D-Link, the left party, like which is like well to the left of like even the regular Socialist Party. And the second was the AFD, which is like,
Yeah.
the neo-Nazi party.
Yeah.
And that's where like young people in Germany are now. That's where young people in France are right now, young people in England.
Because because you would say they're anti-system. Young
They're
people,
anti-system
they
because
listen to Joe Rogan. They're
yeah,
anti-system.
yeah. But not just that. Listen, look. If you're under 40, right? Like, and in America, like, just use America as an example, right? Like, what have you seen in your lifetime, right? What you've seen is, global war on terror, huge failure, right? Yeah, Afghanistan, Iraq, America, ended in defeat. You've seen the economic meltdown, and the fact that there's never been a full recovery from that economic meltdown.
Yeah.
You've seen like the Democrats losing to Trump. You've seen like the COVID crisis, and then the inflation that came out of that. You've really seen a system that like feels like it's not like functioning and working.
Yes.
And that's made a lot of people. It's not. I mean, like Rogan is the symptom. He's not the cause, right?
He's not the cause.
The
Yeah.
cause is like you have seen a system that has not worked for you, that is not like delivered for you, and now the average age of a first time home buyer in the United States is 56, right?
It's
Like
incredible.
like yeah, you, unless you're interested like these basic issues, affordability, housing, people having some sort of stable sense of a life so they can imagine a career where they ended up retiring. That's not where America is right now, right? Like,
Hey, Jeet, three. I could talk to you for 5 hours,
Yeah,
but three quick ones, and then we're done.
sure.
I think the issue of immigration is a huge issue.
Mm,
Again, the right demagogues it. I
yeah,
used to do some of that, but I think Dems have ignored this issue at their own peril.
yeah.
This issue matters to working class people.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I think there has to be like a solution. If you're talking about the polling, I mean, I think one of the reassuring things is a lot of the people that support mass deportation are also open to a pathway to citizenship.
Yes.
Now, I think what that means is like
Yeah.
the current system is broken, which is the
Broken.
current system is you have a lot of people undocumented in America, but there's no pathway for them to become citizen, and so you create a class of people that are going to inherently undercut wages that can easily be exploited by bosses and are. And then like we know, and there's like no willingness to like address this. Um, you know, uh, Aside from Bernie, like from a left perspective, which is to say, like creating this underclass of undocumented workers means you're going to get a lot more economic exploitation. And as a matter of fact, you do. I mean, like what you were seeing in places like the sort of sweatshops, in like meat factories, even in things like roofing, and you're seeing like kids, like a return to sort of Dickensian child
Yeah.
labor of like the kids who are like 13, 14, 15, undocumented, who are working in these like sweatshop conditions, and that is the status quo. So if that's the status quo, then people are going to be open to a demagogue like Trump, who has
Yes.
what I think are like obscene solutions
Yes.
of like mass
Yes.
deportation. But
Exactly right.
so there's been a real cowardice in like actually acknowledging what the reality is, and the reality, and the sort of kumbaya rhetoric of like Ellis Island, like that's actually not the reality. The reality
So
is that
yeah.
you've allowed a system of economic exploitation that just like undermines what America should be.
So second to last question.
Yeah,
Trump is blowing up the world order. He's
yeah,
siding with Putin.
mhm,
He's siding against freedom and democracy in Europe.
yeah.
Gee, just everything Trump is doing abroad, will any of that have any political impact on him here?
I don't know. So, well, I think some of it will. Like, I think the tariff stuff actually does hurt him, and I think there's a reason why he kind of backed down on the Canada and Mexico, because I think the
Yeah.
stock market does spook him, and I think there's a lot of people in Republican states like Florida that actually depend on things like tourism and trade. So I think that there's some of that backlash. I think it's a hard. I mean, I'll tell you, like, because I'm in Canada right now. And like Trump has done something I never thought possible, which is he's made Canadians nationalistic.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
go into you go to supermarkets now, and they're putting like little maple leaves on all Canadian-made products, because that's what the only thing people want to buy, right?
Yeah.
And you're seeing like in Germany, the recent election, this
Yeah.
conservative guy Merz one, who's like traditionally the Christian Democrats are the big bulwarks of NATO and supporting NATO. And the first thing Merz said when it's clear he's going to be the next chancellor is like Europe needs an independent foreign policy. And I think that what's gonna happen in the short run is that you're gonna see like this real, I wouldn't say anti-Americanism, but like some anti-Trumpism, and but also a lot of these like allies thinking like we can't rely on the United States, we gotta like do it on our own.
Yeah.
um Now, to what degree the American people become aware of this, I don't know. I mean, like that's a little bit, as you say, it's on us, it's on you.
Yeah.
I actually think like I mean, I'm happy to like spread the message. I've never I wouldn't say people are like mad at the United States, but it's more like a sort of sadness or disappointment. Where like if you have like a friend that
It's
has been your friend all your life, and he suddenly becomes a meth addict,
That's
and
gee, that's a perfect way to put it. That's what I hear from people
yeah,
abroad. There's sadness and disappointment. Hey, last question.
yeah.
Are you bearish or bullish on the Democratic Party? Do you think they'll do what they need to do to win, or are you afraid they may not?
The short term, actually quite bullish, because I mean that that Joe Walsh coalition of college educated they show up and vote in
Yeah.
midterms. They show up and vote in special election. So I actually think, like, the next 2 years and the midterms are going to be good for them. I think Virginia is going to look really good for them because that's where a lot of the federal workers are.
Yeah.
Now, so the real question is, 2028. Like,
Yeah.
can you take that existing coalition, expand it enough, and win back those, former Democratic voters who stayed out, the working class voters, the younger people of color, the younger people. If you can, then I'm super bullish, but that has to be the precondition. So short term, actually, I think the Democrats are going to do quite well in any special election midterm. But the real question is, like, a national coalition in a presidential year. Like what can you
Yeah.
do to win back those people?
All right. Last question. Give me a 15-second answer. Will America ever have more than two major political parties?
No, I
No.
think that I don't think the third party can work in the existing structure. It's
Um,
baked in.
his name is Jeet Heer, and you need to follow him. You need to read everything he writes. He writes for The Nation, puts out great stuff. Follow him on Twitter @HeerJeet. Follow him everywhere. I love to talk to him. Jeet, my friend, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been a great conversation.
Be brave, everybody.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow The Social Contract with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been The Social Contract with